are continuing to enter the Stefon Diggs chat, and we have someone entering the chat. Here's Chris Price of the Boston Globe to continue this conversation. Chris, just to start, what did you think of this news when you heard it? Were you surprised at all that it happened, or by the timing?
I was not surprised by the timing because the new league year is obviously coming up and they needed to make a decision on the cap hit, quite frankly. And when you talk about the National Football League, I would say 95% of all decisions come down to money. The Patriots, I know, wanted him back, but not at that price point. And so they basically decided to shake hands like adults and move on and move forward. Now, this puts a lot of pressure. Both sides, really, for my money, are really rolling the dice here because the Patriots need to kind of find a way to, get the production and also find a way to kind of, get a little more leadership in that receiver room. I know that it might be a surprise to a lot of folks, but he was a real leader for that group of young receivers. And then obviously on the other side, you got Steph going out in the open market thinking he's going to make more than $25 million next year. So both sides rolling the dice. It's a gamble, but it's going to be fascinating to see what's going to happen with both the player and the team moving forward.
I completely agree, Chris. In fact, I think Stefon helped himself earn maybe that payday potentially. We got to see the legalities of this, which is where I'm going with this guy. Do you think everything I'm hearing is this is financial, this is financial? Look, man, I don't know if I'm buying all that, Chris. I think something legally, and maybe the Patriots just got tired of dealing with this guy, but don't you think there's something to this court case that maybe they help them kind of be like, yeah, let's get this guy out of here? Or was there an internal investigation where they think this guy is guilty? Can you speak to the legalities of what's going on with Stefon Diggs as it pertains to this decision?
It's interesting because a lot of people are bringing up, and I heard you guys joking about it before, the incident at the restaurant and all of that, and is all that tied together? It is all a matter of timing. If they had made a move on this a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, then I would say that, it'd be a different deal. And I understand that a move like this, you can't look at it in a vacuum. But again, I'll go back to the idea, it's money. It's all about money in the National Football League. And, the idea that they didn't want to take that hit. Look, I'm not going to pretend that the other stuff wasn't a part of the conversation. But at the end, when it comes right down to it, they didn't want to have a 33-year-old wide receiver on the books for $26.5 million next year. That's really the bottom line for me. And so that's kind of where we are at this point.
When you saw that Stefon Diggs was scrubbing his Instagram and unfollowed the Patriots, did you read anything into that? Did you think, something is coming, some news is coming? Or was it just like, maybe it has nothing to do with anything else?
I think it's part of it. I think it's in this day and age, you have to look to social media, especially when you talk about a guy like Diggs, who's used social media, I think, to his advantage over the years to kind of promote him and promote his brand. I think that, usually portends a reset button in some form or fashion. So, yeah, I do think that there was part of that. I was the one who asked him after the game, after Super Bowl 60, do you anticipate being here next year? And in that moment, he seemed to be very open and very excited about the possibility of coming back. I know it was, an hour after the game and, the emotions are still fresh. But at the same time, he sounded like a guy who was invested in this team moving forward. And he sounded like someone who was very interested in being a part of this team moving forward. But yeah, I mean, you take it all into account, the social media, the scrubbing of the Instagram account, the off-field conversations, it's all part of it. But again, I think it all kind of comes back to, the financial considerations.
All right, Chris, we're all family here. Let's get down to the brass tacks. We got to replace the guy. I have made no bones. A.J. Brown is exactly what this team needs, and Mike Vrabel is the exact coach to keep them in line, because everyone says the same thing when I bring this up. The counterpunch is, yeah, but he's a pain in the butt. He's a this, he's a diva, he's a that. True, check every box. However, never have I seen any issues in Tennessee. He was younger, but still productive, no issues in Tennessee under Mike Vrabel. Is he the best option in your opinion? Are you looking elsewhere at the available targets at wide receiver?
I think when you consider everything, when you consider all of the candidates, all the other options, I hate to tell you guys, I'd hate to tell you, Lucy and Casey this, but I'm kind of siding with Travis on this one. I really am. When you consider A.J. Brown and you consider his history with Mike Vrabel, I think that's very, very important to consider when you talk about a guy who may have had some off-field issues, but you know what? Mike Vrabel's going to put his arm around him and say, I know you're a pain in the ass, but you're a pain in our ass. So we're going to ride with you. You're going to be our guy. We're going to get you the ball. We're going to give you 100 targets a year moving forward. And I think that's the move. I think the one thing, though, guys, that you really have to think about is the price for him. I can understand giving up a 1, but I don't know if I'm interested in giving up a 2. Maybe, if you say a 1 and a 4.
Yes.
And then the Patriots send it, the Patriots get, let's say a 6 or a 7 in return to kind of even things out a little bit on that old Jimmy Johnson trade chart. I think that's a possibility. But yeah, when you consider all the candidates, when you consider the landscape out there, you want a guy who can be a number 1 next year. I think A.J. Brown's your best chance.
Bro, you're preaching. I saw the DJ Moore move. We talked about it earlier in the show. I think that helps the A.J. Brown sweepstakes because I know the Eagles' asking price is high, but I thought the DJ Moore trade was fair for both teams.
Yeah, it was. It was a good trade for both teams. And I think, kudos to the Bills for finding another wide receiver because, they were getting awful thin at that position. So
that's right.
Look, I think that, you can make an argument for Alec Pierce. It's funny. I did my podcast today with Chris Hogan, and there's a lot of Chris Hogan in Alec Pierce's game.
Yeah.
And even Hogan said, look, I wouldn't pay him $30 million. But if you can find a way to talk him down to 20 plus, maybe there's a conversation there.
Yeah.
But for a guy like Alec Pierce, who caught 40 balls last year, to, you're talking about an average annual value of $30 million a year. That's a little pricey for me. No pun intended.
Hi, Chris. Okay, so Travis and I have been having this debate because he's been on the A.J. Brown train for quite some time, but now I'm feeling a little trepidatious because if you move on from Diggs, you don't even try to use him in any sort of trade capacity. I feel like that screams locker personality, not dealing with anything outside of it's time to handle business in the locker room the Patriots way. So while A.J. Brown was very responsive to Vrabel in Tennessee, it still screams to me that the Patriots have been tremendous with that underdog mentality, being able to kind of find diamonds in the rough. Is there a diamond in the rough that doesn't particularly break the bank, that makes sense? As you say, Alec Pierce maybe needs to come down a smidge there, but is there something that makes sense and fits the bill here where he doesn't have to wonder if he's going to have to babysit his wide receiver 1 heading into next season?
Dynamite question, Casey. It really is. And I don't think there are any guys out there right now who would fit the bill of a quote unquote number 1 wide receiver who would really kind of, fulfill that description. I think it's tough. You have a bunch of guys out there who are maybe number 2s and number 3s. I could be talked into 2 years of Mike Evans and making New England his last stop before Canton. Yep. Because not only would you theoretically get a guy who could catch you 50, 60 balls next year, but would fill that leadership void in the locker room. And I think that would really kind of, I heard you guys talking before about the perception that the Patriots might be the perception around the league that the Patriots might have as a result of what happened with the Diggs thing. If you sign a guy like Mike Evans, that all goes away because he's one of the most well-respected guys around the league. And so maybe that's a possibility, Casey, but that's a really good question to consider because there are not a lot of other guys like that who might be capable of leading a wide receiver room who would not necessarily command a $30 million a year average annual value.
And with all of this going on, what do you think their plan is for the draft?
Well, it depends, really, Lucy. I mean, if they can find a way to, let's say they find a way to get Mike Evans. And so that maybe lessens, the idea of drafting a wide receiver in the first round or the second round. The guy who stood out to me, and now I think they'd have to trade up to get him, is someone like Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end out of Oregon, who is fantastic. They're a tremendous combine. It's obviously a position in need for the Patriots. That's an area where I can see them focusing, kind of a surprise area if they wanted to kind of throw everybody a curveball. Mason Freeling, offensive lineman at the end of the first round, I think he'd be a really good possibility. The other guy who I was really impressed with was Zion Young out of Missouri, an edge rusher. I made the old Brady Bunch Johnny Bravo. He fits the suit analogy because you look at Zion Young and he really projects as a world-class pass rusher off the edge for Missouri. He's, the body, the whole bit, the bend, the burst coming around the edge. So there's a lot of possibilities for them when it comes to the draft, but I think you got to let free agency kind of play out a little bit before you can really kind of drill down on some of those specifics. There are obvious positions of need across the board for this team. Offensive line, edge rusher, they want to get deeper at wide receiver. But when you talk about the draft, you got to let kind of the free agency scenario kind of play itself out before we get there.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Well, first of all, you're talking my language a number of ways because I am a massive tight end fan. They're my favorite position for a reason, but I'm also a snob when it comes to the right tight end being the right fit systematically, but also draft capital, something else that my dear friends and I here on Boston's End of the Chat can be a little picky about.
It's me, Chris.
Okay, yeah, sorry. He's quick to give away some picks, and I'm a little stingy. I'm thinking 31st pick. I feel like fans or, some analysts are too dismissive of it because sometimes you can find great players. We know numbers of them from the second round and the third round, so why not that 31st pick for a team that has a good amount of pillars? They don't want to move Will Campbell. They've already made their statement on guys that they're going to continue to have faith in. So, what would be your go-to in terms of, a good catch position-wise at 31, or would you give away that 31 pick for somebody else?
I would give it away for A.J. Brown.
Oh,
I'll say that.
Same.
I would give it away for, it was funny. I heard Joe before. I think Joe had some PTSD when it came to drafting, out of the 31 position, which is entirely reasonable. I think it's a fair concern if you're a Patriots fan. Casey, I got a couple of tight end names for you to consider, including one guy who was, I swear to God, was created out of a Bill Belichick fan fiction. Oscar Delp, tight end out of Georgia.
Yeah.
High school lacrosse star, thought he was going to college to play college lacrosse.
Yep.
His father played college lacrosse at Rutgers. The only way this guy could be more of a Bill Belichick guy is if his mother was a left-footed punter who went to Navy. That's a guy who is like a third or fourth. You talk about finding value at the tight end spot in the third or fourth round if you don't want to go Kenyon Sadiq in the first round. Oscar Delp is one of those guys. Oscar Delp is one of those names to consider when you're talking about day 2 guys, day 3 guys who could add some value at that position. And the other thing, too, specific to the tight end spot, I asked Vrabel at the Combine, what stands out for you about this draft class? And the first position he mentioned was tight end.
Ooh,
wow.
It's something
specifically about the volume and the depth there at the tight end position. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised to see, I think, again, Sadiq is probably off the board for them at 31 unless they want to trade up to the middle of the first round. I would think someone like an Oscar Delp, Jolly out of North Carolina State, someone is a middle round guy who ends up kind of coming in and working and basically serving as Hunter Henry's backup this season.
I love this.
Can't wait to see what happens and what the Patriots do here. Chris Price of the Boston Globe, thank you so much for joining us.
By the way, Lucy, I'm with you. Friday night, I'm watching the World Baseball Classic.
Wow.
Thank you, Chris. It's Roman Anthony, the best athlete in Boston returns. Roman Anthony, World Baseball Classic. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. We'll be watching together.
Have a good one.
It'll be y'all too.
Exactly.
And everybody else will be on Tatum.
Jason Tatum, who? Coming up next, though, we will be discussing more Patriots, more Stefon Diggs. We will be hearing from you, more voicemails. Call us, leave a voicemail, and we will listen to them next.